All right. So we are live with Kristen. Kristen is a consultant at Accenture at the moment. She is also a content creator and founder of the technology consulting community. Welcome, Kristen. Very good to have you here.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, how's everything going? For those who don't know you, please tell us who you are, what you do. I know I gave a brief introduction, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, so as Riza mentioned, I am a technology consultant at Accenture specializing in Workday Financial software implementation. So it's like basically fancy for I help businesses build their own systems, specifically the ones like if you were to work at a company, you have expense reports, you have to put in your timesheet, you have to like ask for paid time off. But I'm more on the finance side. So actually the people I work with are the finance and accounting team. So even the people who use these systems, they don't necessarily see it. It's really just within a small group of people. So I came from a business background and so at Boston University, I majored in business and I concentrated in finance, management, information systems, and strategy. And that's where I discovered what technology consulting was. So that's how I ended up landing my first job at a college or a university, wherever you are at. And that is really for like in technology consulting. On the
Interesting.
side, yep.
Okay, no, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. On the side, I also do a YouTube channel that focuses more on technology consulting, careers, and money. I just started last year, so it's really still pretty fresh. It really was like most people who started out with like a new quarantine hobby. This was mine.
Interesting. And how did you get into consulting? I know that you said you
Hmm.
studied, like you have a business background,
Yeah,
and now that you're doing consulting, it's more kind of leaning towards or oriented towards technology.
yeah.
So how did you get into that? Were you always interested in, getting into technology?
Honestly, like growing up, I was so interested in everything. There was like psychologist, accountant, director, producer, all these kind of weird, it's like there's no trend
Hmm.
basically. And what I decided was like, okay, well, in college, I knew I was going to do something in business just because my family they're like a bunch of entrepreneurs. And I always felt like, a lot of times I fell in towards like, okay, I want to start my own business or that I had like a business mindset. Like in first grade, I actually had like an origami business. I made $100 off of like first graders. So it was like
Oh,
with like
wow.
little things that cost only 10 cents or 25 cents. I thought that was still pretty impressive in my opinion as a first grader,
Of
but
course.
it just, so that was like, okay, I guess I'll do business, but I just did not know what in business. So I did not even know that there was an area of technology in business. I always was really enthusiastic about technology just because of the generation that we're in. Like it's everything is surrounded by technology, but I just didn't want to be in an area where I just coded all day. So the
Hmm.
happy medium was actually management information systems in the business program, where you're designing systems, you're working with many stakeholders. So it's like basically you're either going to become like a technology consultant or a systems engineer, or that you're a product manager. That's the kind of role that I was looking for, the business side of technology. And that's when I discovered technology consulting. So as I mentioned before, I just like had all these different interests and did not know where to settle. And technology consulting was perfect because depending on what I want to do, like I can actually have 5 projects within the span of 3 years, and all of them will be different. So it's not like I'm leaving the company to do something new. It's like I just stay on the company and then I just do a different project.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of
Yeah,
consulting in a way because you have a large variety of projects that
exactly.
you'd be on, right? With
Mm-hmm.
different stakeholders and solving different kinds of problems and working with different teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what you said about technology consulting, it really does sound like you are the bridge between the tech world and the business world.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay, and what do you find the most challenging about that?
Yeah, I think like because I came out of university, fresh out of college, I was just like, okay, no one's gonna really trust this 21-year-old on telling them what to do about their systems that have been there for 30 years.
Mhm.
So imagine like you're in a room with 50, 60-year-old, and then you have this 21-year-old walking by and so like, yeah, I know everything. I know like better more than you, and you have to listen to me. So
Mhm.
that was actually like probably my biggest hurdle was either getting my team to kind of start to rely on me, or having the client to actually depend on me in a way that like they actually trust me and not go to like the lead or anything like that. So the good thing about consulting is that you learn really quickly. So depending on the project out there, I don't think it's the best for people who need to be handheld. You have to kind of learn on the job and really just take everything in. If you have a mistake, learn from that mistake. If you make
Okay.
that second mistake, we're going to get in trouble, because the client's just going to lose some credibility on you. So that's why it's really important. And my first year, I think I probably grew the most, because I was already told to like present the slides or lead a demo and talk about a system I did not even know about. Even though I went to business school, I don't know how supply chain management works in the real world. So it was just harder for me to relate to the client in that. But just really sitting there observing, and then actually just like actively growing from that too. So don't just take that knowledge and just let it sit there. You have to act on that knowledge. So I think that was really important with my first year, and that's how I got out of the first hurdle.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the main things that I personally found challenging when I started consulting was the whole cadence
Yeah.
with the or at least the customer or client's perception of me. Like being a
Hmm.
very young consultant, it was hard for me to balance out that dynamic.
Hmm.
How did you get over that? Because obviously no matter how experienced or well formulated your solutions are, you know, age and experience and that
Yeah.
perception play a big factor. How did you deal with that?
I think like one thing about consulting, or at least at a big firm, is that you can always say like, oh, my colleague in this particular area has actually worked with a similar client like you. So even if you don't personally know, your network does. And you may not even know this person. You could just probably be like making a post in your little community practice group and say like, hey, has anyone worked with an insurance company doing this thing? And
Yeah.
then they might just say like, okay, yeah, I do know. And we just go on a call, and I'm actively listening as if I'm learning and doing the same thing that they just did. So all I
Hmm.
have to do is just bring that back to the client. And over time, like it's really just your personal identity and brand that is really important. So are you dependable? Like, do they know that they can trust you to be honest? And or do they actually know that you'll do what you're gonna say? If you just like say, yeah, I want to look into it, but never look into it, then just like, yeah, I'm not gonna go to Christine. I want to go to someone else. So that was really important. It's just really like if you set your mind to do it, and then actually show them that you've done the work. So that way, like they know like you're dependable. Another thing I realized was a lot of the older consultants, they sometimes get stuck in their head of like, this is how other clients have done, but they haven't really thought about, oh, what is another way they can do it? So it's
Hmm.
just a different mindset of bringing things in. So like if I was in a project with this 20, someone like they've been in the industry for 20 years, they're going to say, yeah, I've always had supply chain management clients do this, or I've had nonprofit clients do this. And then for me, I'm like, well, that sounds antiquated. Why can't we just change that up and then do this? And now all of a sudden the client's like, oh, I did not even consider that. So sometimes having like fresh blood is actually really good, and the client likes that.
Of course, yeah, because when you're young, you tend to come up with outside the box solutions.
Yep.
And like you said, you have that fresh pair of eyes on
Hmm.
that problem. Okay. And I also wanted to know, since you know I do think that in consulting you have to learn very fast and
Yep.
you have to be very accurate with the way that you're presenting information to the client or even to the internal team. Have you found that the biggest chunk of your learnings come outside of work hours when you're self-studying, or what's your process or kind of habit look like when it comes to learning new material?
Honestly, I think a lot of it is a lot of business related content I learn within the working hours, because I'm working with the clients and seeing like how their business is like. And coming from school, like you only learn how theoretically it could be, you don't learn how realistically does it happen. And you also learn about like, okay, this is what like will happen if you run out of money on a project, but how do you actually see that happen? Like what are the actual implications behind that? So I learned that on the project. But whenever it comes about tech, I think like it does require you to kind of go outside of the work hours, or at least like be prepared to do that. So I've been lucky to do a lot of that within work hours whenever I'm like not 100% on a project. So in consulting, like you actually, at least for me, you can actually be 50% on a project, maybe 25% on a project, and then the rest you can kind of allocate it to however you want to do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to actually look up to it. So if I was on 100% on a project, on the outside, I would be like, okay, what should I do next? Like, what should I get my next certification? Maybe I do need to do some training. And then when I get like to 50%, then I'll slot that training for then. But a lot of like learning current events, knowing like how is it actually make an impact on the industry that I'm working with specifically, that has to be done outside of work hours. You can't just be like Googling on New York Times while you're working on a client call. That's just not really going to be the best of your time.
Yeah. And talking about client calls, I know that it's extremely important to be present and
Yeah.
actively listen, right? And
Yep.
sometimes it's hard with certain clients because they go on a long rant and there's a lot of ups and downs to what they're saying. How do you actively continue listening?
Mhm.
What's your process for that?
I think like honestly, those are my favorite calls. Yeah,
Yeah.
because like it just means that they trust you to say everything that they're saying. A lot of times I know that I would have called like 10 people and only one person's talking, everyone else is silent. But then like two calls later, they're like, oh wait, but we didn't like what you said the first call. I'm like, why didn't you say the first thing?
Exactly.
So what I really like about those calls, and I had a few recently actually, they were just like, okay, I'm going to bombard you with all these questions. And for me, it's really just like, okay, let me synthesize everything, see what you're trying to say. Because I think like one of those skills you need to learn eventually when you're a consultant is really just like go through all of that and figure out what are the most important and most high priorities. So that way, like, okay, if I were to build this system, what can I give up and what can I not give up? And if you don't remember those and you just say to the client, yeah, I'm just going to completely avoid that one big thing you want, but I'm going to have all the other features that you want, they're going to be like, what was that call for then? Even though like you listen to all these other factors. So that was just something that I really liked, is just listening. And I think what I like to do is I actually kind of walk them through what I'm thinking as they're giving me what they're saying. So like, oh, what about this? And then kind of learn a little bit more about what they want as we go through the process. So we kind of work together on that call.
And synthesis is very important, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a large amount of information that's basically coming your way, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to be able to not only categorize them but also be able
Yep.
to basically bucket them, synthesize them, understand which parts are related to others.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times I actually have to while I'm synthesizing, know what are the downstream impacts for other parts that I'm not necessarily in. So if they're saying like, okay, we really want this, but maybe it's doable for that, but like what if we're working with another team that would have negative impacts on that? So now we have to bring that other team into the next call and see like where can we work it out there? So it's almost like I'm a facilitator and they're just kind of chatting things out and working together. But that they wouldn't have been able to do that without my knowledge, knowing that there would be that impact.
Of course, yeah, and most of the time they know more about the subject at hand than
Yep.
the consultant, right? So
Hmm.
facilitator is sometimes the right role to describe, what goes on in some of the meetings.
Right.
So for those listening and for those who are interested in getting into consulting, whether they're right out of university or they're already working in a particular vertical or industry and now they want to get into consulting,
Hmm.
what sorts of tips or feedback or advice would you give to them?
Yep. So I would kind of break this down to two. So one is if you're fresh out of college or that you're in school right now, and then the other one's like if you're an experienced artist, because I think there's like a slightly different way to approach it. So if
Mhm.
you're a student, I would definitely utilize all the resources that your school has during the school year. So like if you have any pro bono program, and even if you don't have a pro bono program, utilize the actual campus itself, because there's probably some internships or some jobs that are there
So
that
so
would be
what is
really
a
good.
what is a pro bono program for those who don't know?
Yeah, so pro bono program is like something where you basically do a service for free, and consulting. So honestly, a lot of times you could just go to a local business and say, "Hey, I see that you're struggling. Like the pandemic probably hit you hard. How can we help you?" And then you just kind of say like, "Okay, we can do this, we can do that," and you can probably coordinate a team with you if you want. If you notice that like maybe they need to revamp a website or they need to redesign their menu, something like that, then you just bring those resources in there, or you could do it yourself. So that kind of client facing experience, I think, is the one that is hardest for students to get. They can probably learn the technical side on their own, or they could probably learn the business acumen, or by like looking at current events or from just like reading up. But they can't get that client facing experience, which is what a lot of consultants need. Or if they have, like, they probably just need to kind of work it into their like when they're working on class projects, but sometimes you may not even have class projects depending on the curriculum you have. So
Mhm.
that's like my biggest recommendation, is try to do something where you have some kind of client facing skills. Even if like the internship or co-op or whatever program you're doing, or apprenticeship even, has like a client facing experience, that's fine, even if it's not consulting. So like I used to work retail at Staples, so it's like office supply store, if you guys didn't know, based in specifically the US. And that was what I did in high school. But I transferred a lot of the actual knowledge I had with how to deal with difficult clients into this. And that is a really good thing to have. So even if it's not the most glamorous job, you are getting experience.
So
So
regardless of the technical
yeah.
skills, which are obviously important, and the
Mhm.
business acumen, like you mentioned, which can be learned, whether academically or otherwise, client-facing experience is something that's difficult to
Yeah.
replicate. So that's something very important.
Yeah, and a lot of consulting firms, they try to see it through the interview. Are you client ready? You may have like everything on the resume, you may know how to answer things, but also how you interact with the interviewer is very important. So they want to see like, can I put you in front of the client on day one? Because actually, when you start at Accenture, they do have sometimes like that, where the first day you're on the job, you're actually on a client meeting
Yeah.
and you're just not supposed to be doing a lot of things that you're not supposed to be doing. So they want to see that, like, I don't want to be training you how to be a good consultant. They want to train you at least on the technical part or maybe some of the industry part, but they don't really want to train you everything when you first start out. Maybe just the basics at least you
Right.
should
So
have
a
down.
lot of that would be, social skills,
Yeah.
emotional intelligence, having the basically EQ to understand
Mhm.
certain nuances of communication, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's like situational awareness as well.
Situational
Like if you
awareness. Yeah.
were to meet up with a managing director or partner, you should be acting differently than if you work to with another analyst. So vice versa, if you were to talk to the client CEO as opposed to the receptionist at the desk.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that was for students or fresh grads, right? And
Yep.
then the other branch that you mentioned is people who are already in
Mhm.
industries.
Yeah, I think this is the hardest part is that a lot of people are like, oh, there's no way I have the relevant experience to get into technology consulting. Do I have to go take a boot camp? Do I need to go learn a coding class or anything like that? And then how do I get into business because I come from like a non-business or non-technology background? And honestly, it's really just like I mentioned, those same soft skills that we talked about earlier. Just see how do you have it right now in your current job? If you work with any clients or maybe customers, use that into your actual interview or your resume. Like just have them highlighted because I think a lot of people they have like a one size fits all resume, but they don't tailor it, and I think that's like a big mistake. You need to tailor it to each position, even company, on
Mm-hmm.
that. So like if you were a doctor, yeah, you're probably going to put in all this scientific jargon, but you want to also focus on your client relationship. Like whenever you had a patient, what did you do to work them out? Like what is your patient experience there? And that is also something that you can highlight in there. So I worked with a lot of experienced hires in my career coaching, and a lot of times that's like the biggest questions, like how do I even do it? But honestly, you are most likely already experienced. You just need to show you're interested in technology, maybe even like learn a few things or so, because if you go into like an advanced role, they're going to expect you to know something. But if you are pivoting into like a lower role where it's more entry level, then you can still learn that. But again, like we said, you need to be a little bit more client ready. So sometimes like either doing pro bono on the side, in which for a technology consulting community, we do have a pro bono program. Some people are actually experienced hires trying to get that experience because they can't do that on their job, or that they just kind of work things out on their resume to highlight that experience.
Interesting. Okay, so basically, do leverage the experiences that you've had, right? Client
Mm-hmm.
facing again or otherwise, in order to tailor your resume and make sure
Yep.
that basically you're flexing all those muscles
Yep.
during the interview process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in terms of some of the things that people fear a lot, especially students, when it comes to case studies and those sorts of interviews, what would you recommend? Like, for example, I know Victor Cheng, he
Mm-hmm.
has a very good kind of school and a few good books on case studies and etc. How would you say is the best way to kind of understand, rather than not memorize but understand,
Yep.
how to go through case studies?
I think the first thing to note is that technology consulting case interviews are actually different. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people who, I myself included, I prepared for a management consulting case interview, came into a technology consulting case interview when I went for Accenture. It was like, this is nothing that I did. It
Oh
was
yeah, it was
completely
different.
different.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, the only reason why I did well was because I just brought back like all that knowledge from management information systems and try to think on my feet, which is what a consultant would be doing anyway. So that's what actually I would recommend is train your mindset. Don't train like exactly what you said. Don't memorize, understand it. So if you
Exactly.
understand what is the whole point of a case interview, like the whole point is not depending on the case you get, it's not always about the right answer. It's about how you got to the answer And sometimes if they want to highlight a personality of yours, highlight it because they want to see, are you different than everyone else? At least at Accenture's point of view, they were looking for creativity. So they, you know, you want to be creative. You don't want to be going for the easy way out. So that is really important, is that knowing the actual mentality behind it, of like actually how to work through the entire interview in the eyes of what the client. So in this case, your interviewer, think about them as a client. Anytime you're throwing jargon at them, already try to like think about, okay, how can I explain this jargon to them in a way that like the client will understand? Because that's what they're looking at too. Like even if they may understand it as a consultant, they are also trying to see how are you like as a client. So are you going to be working them through like, okay, walking them, like asking them questions, or even asking them to clarify a few things, just because like you don't want to make that assumption. And once you make like a big assumption and they're just like running with it, they're going to be like, okay, well, you lost me since the very beginning, and you really don't want that. So again, it's all the mentality of just knowing like, okay, what are the things that they're looking for each time they ask you a question? Really think about what are they actually asking. Don't really just take the question face value or ask about like, okay, I know that you have like probably lower profit margin, and then why are you specifically caring about that? Maybe they're trying to compete with another competitor, and now focus on that. So really it's just knowing it's not face value, kind of dig a little bit deeper because they're expecting you to go to dig deeper.
Yeah, and like you said, it's really about the process that
Yeah.
you go through in order to solve a problem. The interviewer is like the client
Yeah.
in a way, and they just want to know how you're walking through that problem with them, and basically a hypothesis-based approach where you
Mm-hmm.
keep, going down one branch, understanding if it makes sense or not, coming back up, trying and testing out different methods, and
Mm-hmm.
really getting to the root cause in that way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they tend to just like they get all very stunned and they get stuck. But you've done this everywhere. I think everyone's done this everywhere. It's just a matter of transferring it into the interview. So, like for example, if I were to explain to my mom why we should go for Verizon for iOS instead of AT&T, like that's the same exact thing of explaining like why and then how, and also asking them like, what do you care about? Do you care about budget? Do you care about speed? Then that's like the same exact thing. It's just a matter of moving it into an interview. And a lot of times like they may ask you like, okay, all these questions about technology, maybe you came from a non-technology background, but you know something about technology. So let's say for example you have an iPhone, like of course you know what UI is, you work with UI of iPhones, knowing that like it's intuitive and you know where to find certain apps. So you just really need to know the terminology, but then all the dots connect. You just have to kind of get into that mindset of knowing like, okay, if I don't know this, what do I do actually know, and how can I bring that in a way that doesn't make me seem like I'm dumb.
Yeah, yeah, and being able to manage your emotions is also
Yeah.
a big part of it, right? Because
Yep.
at the end of the day, perception is extremely important. Obviously, truth is the truth, but perception is also something that has a lot of weight. So you do want to make sure that if you're stuck in a certain situation, like you said, if you're stunned, if you don't know what to say in the moment, you're able to quickly think on your feet, and that comes
Exactly.
with practice, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then for consultants who are already on the job and they're very well into their careers, let's say 3 to 5 years to 10 years, and they seem to be experiencing a certain plateau with what they do. What do you what do you think about that? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think like usually the first thing is like, why do you think you're facing a plateau? Are you just like bored? Is it the lifestyle? Oh my God, this sun.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just trying to figure out the best
right on your
angle.
face.
Yeah. So I would say like sometimes just figure out why is there a plateau, because I think I faced it a little bit earlier into my career, thinking like, is this all I want to do? Because I came into Accenture wanting to work with new technologies, but they put me into Workday Financials, which I didn't even know until I started. So then I realized like, okay, what did I like about my job? What did I not like about my job? Is this something worth jumping for? Do I like Accenture, or do I just not like the project or the area that I'm in? So knowing the plateau, because sometimes I think a lot of people are like, oh, I value other things outside of my job.
Hmm.
Maybe they don't want to travel that much and they just want to be with their family, or maybe things come up that they're like, everything the priorities have changed now. So that is something really important to know. Like, is consulting really for you at that point? Because I think consulting it's not for everyone, but it's also sometimes people actually really enjoy consulting enough to stay. So I think like whenever people say like consulting is a stepping stone, or that, you know, it's only something for 1 to 2 years, it's okay to stay longer than that. Like for me, that's like what everyone's been saying, like, Christine, you're still at Accenture, you're still doing this. Like, that's fine. It's okay to keep on going with consulting if you enjoy it, but you just have to make sure you know what you like and what you don't like. If you don't constantly think about that, because we do evolve as people, then you also will kind of like dig yourself your own grave, being like, oh, this is what I like, but you really don't like it because you just like the pay, or you just like the travel or the perks that come in with it. And
Yeah.
eventually you'll see like all the ramifications that come in your life, that like maybe your health is starting to deteriorate. But I think the plateau is also something to realize, is that you can move within the consulting firm too. So I have a friend that just recently said like, yeah, Workday is not for me. He just moved over to AWS, Amazon Web Services, within Accenture within a month. It was pretty easy for him. So it's really just like open your mind by networking and see what are the options out there, either within the firm or maybe outside the firm. Maybe a big company is not your thing. Maybe you want to go to a boutique firm, or maybe you even want to go independent or start your own consulting firm. Everything's going to have some kind of sort of risk, or that you're going to be a little bit like, oh, I'm a little bit scared, I'm not comfortable with it. But that's what life is. You're going to have to do that eventually. And even when you go within projects, it's like that. So it's just a matter of like a little shift.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So tell me more about your technology consulting community. What is that about? How did that come about, and what's the vision for it? If it's still active, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, it first started off as I did a YouTube channel as myself, and then I realized like, okay, well, I think there's, like I mentioned before, there not a lot of people knew that there was like a specific type of case that technology consultants get compared
Yeah.
to the management consulting cases. So that's actually where it started out. I was like, okay, I did not feel supported as a student in technology consulting because there's just so much unknown. Everyone talks about management consulting. There's a lot of resources on there, but they don't have anything about technology consulting. So I just randomly started a Facebook group. And then that's where it started to be like a bunch of my friends are in technology consulting. And then we started inviting other people. And then on my channel, I actually was like, okay, I needed some kind of incentive for people on my YouTube channel to get into that Facebook group. So I started a case interview program. So I have like about 2 videos that at that time, 2 videos on technology consulting case interviews. One is on what is it? And then the other one is how to succeed in it. And then I mentioned the program was actually like a pairing program where and it ended up being ended because it's just way too much work. There's like over 500 people on that list, and I can't do that every day while on top of my day job. And that really is just like you're on this list and these are all your practice partners. And I would pair you up with someone who's within the same similar skill set or in time zone. And then that's how it worked out. And because of that, there was just so much traffic going into that Facebook group, specifically for cases. And then eventually people start to learn about it outside of just the case interview program, because now Facebook groups like get recommended, or their friends are like, oh, you know, you should join this Facebook group if you're interested. And that's how it started out. So now we have a lot of experienced hires, a lot of like actual experienced consultants as well, that come in and they provide their own feedback as well. So if like a student asks like, how is it like to be a technology consultant in this field at EY, then there's probably someone out there that
Mhm.
is in that field that responds to that person. And I was actually debating, should it be on LinkedIn? Should it be on like a Facebook group? Should it be on something else? And I thought Facebook group, because LinkedIn, I had a feeling a lot of people are just going to be either fake, or they're going to feel it's like there's like some kind of layer that they
Yeah,
feel
there's that
judged
dynamics to
almost.
filter
Yeah.
it. Yeah, to
Yeah. So
LinkedIn for sure.
Facebook group, at least, like there's no one knows like what role you are unless you mention it. So it's like almost everyone is on the equal playing field. And that's what I really liked about Facebook. Also, because I use it a lot for Messenger with my own friends, it's just might
Yeah.
as well. And then eventually that ended up developing to a lot bigger than I thought. I thought it was just going to be a Facebook group, but now it's actually technology consulting community. There's a website on it, there's programs on it, events and whatnot. And that program ended up dying, but there's still a lot of the resources there. But we do have a pro bono program in which I realized like the trend in everyone's response and posts is that they just don't have the client facing experience, or that they've been rejected for this so reason. And then I made a poll one day asking like, okay, what is the reason why you feel like you need experience? a lot of them said client-facing experiences. So that's why I chose to do a pro bono program. I've never done a pro bono program before, either like at school or in person or on my own or whatnot. So everything was fresh. I had to do everything on my own. And I made like surveys and I sent them out to a lot of clients. We have over 70 plus countries on in the Facebook group community. And because of that, we also have a lot of international clients. But to start out, we started out in the US first. So that way it's a manageable time zone for
Mhm.
me in the beginning. And then eventually we're going to grow to a bigger program. So our program is actually about to end in 2 months. And then we're going to have another rollout with a lot more international clients. So there's a few like in Asia or Australia and Europe. So we're going to branch out. So now that people have a taste of the program and I know like how to run this program a little bit better, we know how to do this on a global scale.
That's great. It's always good to be the one who initiates creating platforms like this
Mm-hmm.
to help and inform and grow aspiring
Yep.
consultants or what have you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that as time passes by, yourself and other people who do have these kinds of platforms will maybe even switch things up in order to accommodate for the newer generations and the way
Yep.
that they're learning, right? So I've seen a lot of videos these days on, let's say, TikTok, where people provide tips on how to get a specific type of role in a specific
Yep.
industry, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Christine, this was really great. I don't know if you want to talk about anything else, but it's been really nice chatting with you.
All right. One other question I have is like, do you know when this episode's coming out?
Yes, next Monday.
Okay. All right. So I have a little plug then.
Oh, for sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, so if you're interested in joining that pro bono program I just mentioned, we are ending our first round, first phase in 2 months, but we're actually opening up applications soon for the next round. So if you're interested in something like that, definitely check it out.
Okay, and I'll also make sure to add the links down in the video as well so people can access it.
Definitely.
Thanks a lot, Kristen, for your time. Really nice chatting with you.
All right. Thank you so much.